Alright, today we're going to be looking at making box plots and finding outliers. So we have our data given the following progress check scores. We want to create a box plot and then we're going to determine our outliers. So the first thing, whenever we have a set of data, the first step, we always put the data in order. So we're going to put the data in order from least to greatest. So step one, put data in order from least to greatest. Alright, so we're going to put our data in order from least to greatest. So we look at our data and we find our lowest value. So up here the lowest value would be 22 and then 34. So we have 22, 34, with no 40s. Now we have a 60, two 60s. So 60, then 60, we have 62, 68 and 68, no more 60s, now we're on 70 and 70, so two 70s, a 72, 74, 78, and then 80, so 82, 86, 86, 88. Then we have three 92s, I'm running out of room, and then 100. So the data is all in order. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So we have all 20 numbers. So step one, we had to put the data in order. Step two, we determine the median, the middle number. So we're going to determine the middle number, which is the median. So if we have, the median divides the data in half, so if we have 20 numbers, so if there's 20 numbers and we divide by 2, it gives us 10. So we know it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So halfway is in between 72 and 74. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're going to take 72 plus 74 divided by 2, and that will give us our median, which the value of the median is 73. So our median value is 73. Step 3, so we put our data in order. We found the middle value, which is in between 72 and 73. We determine the upper and lower quartiles. That's the half, the lower half, the middle of the lower half, and the middle of the upper half. So middle of lower half and middle of upper half. So we want to find that middle point of the lower half of the data and of the upper half of the data. So when we look at, this is my lower half right here. There's 10 numbers, halfway is 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I know that my lower quartile, my quartile 1, I'm going to do 62 plus 68 divided by 2. So that's going to give me 65. So we add it together, it gives us 130. 130 divided by 2, 65. That's our lower quartile. Then the upper quartile, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here's the upper part of the data. So 5 numbers, 5 numbers. So what's in between 86? So we're going to do 86 plus 88 divided by 2. That'll give us 87. So that's our upper quartile, 87. So we put our data in order. We found our median, which is our middle number. Separates it into 2 groups of 10. Then we found the middle of each group, and we separate into 4 groups of 5. So notice how we have 5 numbers, 5 numbers, 5 numbers, and 5 numbers. So each group has 5 numbers. Now, the last step here, the step 5, we determine the upper and lower extremes. So we're going to determine the highest and lowest values. So determine highest and lowest values. So the highest value is going to be right here, which is 100. That's our upper extreme. The lowest value is right here, which is 22. That's our lower extreme. And that's how we are making our box plot. Now the second part is determining the outliers. To determine the outliers, the first thing we have to do is we have to calculate the IQR. The IQR stands for the interquartile range. To do this, all we're going to do is we're going to do the upper quartile, which is Q3, and subtract the lower quartile, which is Q1. This is the box. So whatever the box makes, it gives you the IQR. So we're going to do the upper quartile minus the lower quartile. So when we look back at the data, the upper quartile was 87. The lower quartile was 65. So we're going to do 87 minus 65, which gives us a value of 22. So now we know that the IQR equals 22. And we're going to need to know the IQR in order to do step 2 and 3. So now step 2, we're going to calculate the lower limit. So calculate, or we'll do the upper limit. The upper limit. Now with a box plot, the highest value that we can go is it's 1.5 times the IQR. So the IQR represents this box. So the IQR is the box. It goes from Q1 to Q3. So for our data, what we want to do is we don't want the data to be more than 1.5 of the length of these boxes. So to calculate the upper limit, we're going to use this formula. It's Q3, the upper quartile, plus 1.5 times the IQR. So it's the upper limit plus 1.5 times the IQR. So when we look back, we know that the upper limit was, or the upper quartile, it was 87. So we're going to do 87 plus 1.5 times 22. So we'll just take our calculators out. We're going to type that in, 87 plus 1.5 times 22. And that's going to give us a value of 120. So now we know that the upper limit is 120. That means that there's no values can be above this. So no values can be above 120. Step 3, we're going to calculate the lower limit. So calculate the lower limit. Now the formula is basically the same, except the lower limit, we're going to use the lower quartile. So our formula it's going to be the lower quartile, which is going to be Q1. So we're going to do Q1. Now it's the lower limit, so we don't want it to be, we can't go lower than this, so we are actually going to subtract 1.5 times the IQR. So notice how with the upper limit we added, with the lower limit we're subtracting. So we added for the upper, subtract for the lower. Now this value was 65 minus 1.5 times 22. So now we just type in our calculator and we do 65 minus 1.2. And we are going to get, so we get 32. So now we know that we have a lower limit of 32. So a lower limit of 32. What this means is that there's no values can be lower than 32. So we can't have any values higher than 120, and we can't have any values lower than 32. So when we go back and look at our data, our highest value was 100, so that's okay because that's not higher than 120, but our lowest value was 22. So what we can say is that we have an outlier. So are there any outliers? Yes. 22, because it is lower than 32. So we have an outlier of 22 since it's less than 32. So an outlier cannot be lower than the lower limit or higher than the upper limit. And then, so we look at 22, that is less than it. So that's an outlier. And then we have 34. 34 is not less than 22, so that is not an outlier. So that's how we calculate our outliers. So we have to calculate all of these values first, the median, the upper, the lower quartiles, the upper and lower extremes. And then we're going to use these formulas. So you have to be able to use the formula for the IQR, Q3 minus Q1. So you're going to need to know these formulas right here. You need to know this formula. You need to know the formula for the upper limit, Q3 plus 1.5 times the IQR, and you need the formula for the lower limit, Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR. So this is how we determine whether we have limits and how we can make box plots using all of our values. Now we're going to do a quick practice and go over our answers.